You know that moment when your entire world collapses in front of hundreds of people, and there's absolutely nowhere to hide. When the person you trusted most betrays you in the most public, humiliating way possible. That's exactly what happened to Amaka Johnson on what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. But here's the thing about rock bottom. Sometimes it's the most solid foundation you'll ever stand on. This is a story about betrayal, resilience, and discovering strength you never knew you had. And if you've ever felt abandoned, overlooked, or counted out, you need to hear what happens next. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button because stories like this, real stories about real strength, that's what we're all about here. Now let me take you to St. Michael's Cathedral in Ikoyi, Lagos, on a perfect Saturday afternoon. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and gardenias. Golden sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, painting these incredible kaleidoscopic patterns across the white runner leading to the altar. And there, bathed in that soft, heavenly glow, stood Amaka Johnson. She was absolutely breathtaking. This vision in ivory lace with intricate Nigerian-inspired beadwork that caught the light with every nervous breath she took. Her dark, intelligent eyes, usually so calm and observant, held this fragile hope that just illuminated her entire face. This was her moment, her wedding day. The culmination of years of quiet prayers whispered beside her mother, Mama Nkem, and countless girlish dreams shared with Chisom, her best friend since primary 4. Behind her, Chisom was adjusting that cathedral-length veil, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "You look utterly breathtaking, Nwanyi Oma," she whispered, squeezing Amaka's arm. Like grace personified. Amaka managed this small, nervous smile. "I feel like I might float away, Chisom. Or faint." "Nonsense," Mama Nkem murmured from her other side. Her own elegant burgundy lace, Iro and Buba, were simple but stunning. She clasped her daughter's hand, her touch warm and steadying. "God's hand is upon you, and His peace, remember? Breathe." Mama Nkem's quiet faith was this bedrock that Amaka had always leaned on. That gentle, unshakable belief that God was always working, even when you couldn't see it. But across the aisle, something was off. Obiora, Chijioke's cousin, was fidgeting with his tie, his gaze darting toward the empty space beside Pastor Nduka at the altar. He'd seen Chijioke earlier that morning, unusually tense, constantly checking his phone, this slight sheen of sweat on his brow despite the air conditioning. See, Obiora knew Chijioke's charming persona, the smooth-talking, successful entrepreneur who'd swept Amaka off her feet with grand gestures and promises whispered in Lagos's most exclusive lounges. But Obiora had also glimpsed the cracks. The impatience when Amaka lingered over choosing a charity to support. The subtle dismissiveness when she spoke passionately about her small catering business. The way his charm could switch off like a light. A knot of unease was tightening in Obiora's stomach. Something felt wrong. In a shadowed corner near the back, leaning against a cool stone pillar, stood Kunle. His expression was a storm cloud, bitterness etched into every line around his mouth. He'd loved Amaka fiercely, possessively, years ago. Her gentle rejection, citing his controlling nature, had curdled that love into resentment. Seeing her there, radiant, about to marry the wealthy, effortlessly charming Chijioke, it felt like salt ground into a wound that had never truly healed. And then there was Ngozi, Amaka's distant cousin, perched on the edge of a pew halfway down. Her eyes weren't filled with joy. They were sharp, acidic with envy. Ngozi had always felt overshadowed by Amaka's quiet beauty, her genuine kindness, the way people just gravitated toward her serene presence. The grandeur of this wedding, the obvious wealth Chijioke represented, it was this stark contrast to Ngozi's own struggles. She picked at her elaborate jail, this tight, insincere smile fixed on her face, whispering pointed comments about the extravagance. The tension was building, but nobody could have predicted what was about to happen. The organ swelled, filling the cathedral with those triumphant opening chords of the wedding march. A collective sigh of awe rippled through the congregation. Mama Nkem squeezed Amaka's hand one last time, her eyes shining with tears of pride. Chisom beamed, ready to step forward. Pastor Nduka, resplendent in his robes, turned toward the entrance with this warm smile, ready to welcome the bride. Amaka took her first step onto that runner, her heart pounding this frantic rhythm against her ribs. This was it, the moment she'd envisioned 1,000 times. She lifted her gaze toward the altar, toward the man who had vowed to be her forever. The altar was empty. Let me say that again. The altar was empty. A beat of silence descended, thick, disbelieving, suffocating. Amaka stopped mid-step, her smile freezing, then slowly dissolving into confusion. Chisholm stumbled slightly behind her, her bouquet dipping. Mama Nkem's breath hitched. Murmurs began to rustle through the guests like dry leaves in wind. Obiora closed his eyes briefly, his worst suspicion confirmed. Kunle's bitter expression shifted to stunned disbelief, then this flicker of grim satisfaction. Ngozi leaned forward, eyes wide with horrifying fascination. Pastor Nduka cleared his throat, his smile faltering. He glanced toward the sacristy door, expecting Chijioke to emerge, perhaps delayed by some last-minute adjustment. Seconds stretched into eternity. The organist, sensing the tension, faltered. The music died this awkward, painful death. And Amaka stood utterly alone in the center of that aisle, the spotlight of hundreds of eyes burning into her. The beautiful gown suddenly felt like a shroud. Those fragrant flowers smelled cloying, suffocating. The silence roared in her ears, louder than any music. Her graceful posture remained, but it was the rigid grace of a statue about to shatter. Where was he? Why wasn't he there? Obiora couldn't bear it anymore. He surged to his feet, hurrying toward the sacristy, pushing the door open. Empty. He checked his phone. No messages from Chijioke. His own call went straight to voicemail. Cold dread washed over him. He returned to the main church, catching Pastor Nduka's eye and giving this minute, despairing shake of his head. The murmurs crescendoed into shocked whispers. Where is he? Has something happened? He wouldn't. Would he? Tears welled in Mama Nkem's eyes, her lips moving in silent, fervent prayer. Chisholm stepped forward, wrapping a protective arm around Amaka's waist, her own face pale with fury and disbelief. Amaka, she whispered, her voice thick, but Amaka didn't seem to hear. Her eyes remained fixed on that empty space where Chijioke should have been standing. The quiet faith that usually radiated from her seemed to flicker, threatened by this rising tide of humiliation so profound it stole her breath. She felt exposed, dissected under the pitiless gaze of the congregation. She saw the pity, the shock, the morbid curiosity, and Ngozi's poorly concealed, almost triumphant scrutiny. Pastor Nduka stepped forward, his face grave, radiating deep compassion. He approached Amaka slowly, his voice low and gentle, meant only for her, Chisholm, and Mama Nkem, but carrying in that dreadful silence. My child, Amaka, something unforeseen seems to have occurred. Perhaps we should... Then Amaka moved. She didn't collapse. She didn't scream. She took this deep, shuddering breath that seemed to draw strength from the very core of her being. She straightened her spine, lifting her chin. The tears pooling in her eyes didn't fall. She looked from Pastor Nduka's compassionate face to her mother's tear-streaked one, then to Chisholm's fiercely protective glare. No, Amaka said, her voice clear and surprisingly steady, cutting through the whispers like a bell. It wasn't loud, but it resonated with this quiet authority that silenced the entire room. No more waiting, no more perhaps. She turned, her movements deliberate, regal even in her devastation. The heavy train of her gown whispered against the polished floor as she began to walk back down the aisle she had so joyfully entered moments before. She didn't look at the guests. She looked straight ahead, her gaze fixed on those large wooden doors at the back of the cathedral. The silence now was absolute, heavy with collective shock and dawning, horrified understanding. The bride was leaving the altar, alone. Chisholm immediately fell into step beside her, a pillar of furious solidarity. Mama Nkem, leaning heavily on Obiora, who had rushed to her side, followed, her prayers now audible, tearful whispers for strength. The journey out of that church felt like walking through a nightmare. The stairs were physical things, scraping against Amaka's skin. She heard a choked sob from an aunt, the harsh click of Ngozi's tongue. Kunla's gaze followed her. This complex mix of lingering bitterness and strange, reluctant respect for her composure. She kept walking, one foot in front of the other, her head held high. The quiet faith hadn't vanished, it had transformed. It wasn't a gentle light now, but this fierce inner fire fueled by dignity, demanding she walk through this inferno without crumbling. Those heavy cathedral doors closed behind them, shutting out the gawking eyes, but not the echoing humiliation. The bright Lagos sunlight felt like an assault. Paparazzi, tipped off about the high-profile wedding, surged forward, cameras flashing like malevolent fireflies. Obiora and a hastily summoned usher formed this protective barrier, shielding Amaka, Chisom and Mama Nkem as they hurried toward the waiting vintage Rolls-Royce, the car meant for the newlyweds. Chisom practically bundled Amaka inside. Mama Nkem collapsed beside her, finally letting her tears flow freely. Obiora slammed the door shut, barking instructions at the driver. Inside that plush, silent car, the dam broke. Amaka's rigid control dissolved into silent, racking sobs that shook her entire frame. The beautiful lace bodice felt constricting, suffocating. Chisom held her tightly, murmuring fierce, tearful words. That coward, that worthless, spineless jerk. How dare he? You are everything, Amaka, everything he doesn't deserve. Mama Nkem clasped both their hands, her prayers now a continuous, anguished stream. Chineke, cover us. Holy Spirit, be our strength. Angel of the Lord, encamp around my child. But this was just the beginning of Amaka's story. What happened next would change everything. The news exploded like a bomb across Lagos social media. Wealthy entrepreneur abandons bride at altar. Ikoyi wedding scandal. Chijioke Nwosu a no-show. Amaka's name, her picture in that stunning wedding gown were everywhere. The narrative spun wildly. Had she done something wrong? Was there a secret? Was Chijioke in an accident? Speculation was rampant, cruel, and utterly relentless. Amaka retreated. She shut herself away in Mama Nkem's modest but comforting Surulere apartment, drawing the curtains against the world. That beautiful gown hung like a ghost in the closet. Cards arrived, some kind, many expressing awkward condolences for a loss that wasn't a death but felt like one, a few undoubtedly laced with gossipy curiosity. And Chijioke? He was completely incommunicado. A curt, formal statement released by his PR team days later cited unresolved personal matters and requested privacy. No explanation, no apology directed at Amaka. The cowardice was breathtaking. Chisom was a constant, ferocious presence. She fielded calls, screened messages, brought food Amaka couldn't eat, and simply sat with her in shared, furious silence. Then Obiora arrived one evening, looking exhausted and deeply ashamed. He carried this small envelope. Amaka, he said, his voice rough. There are no words. What he did, it's unforgivable. I found this shoved in the back of his desk drawer at the office. He must have forgotten it. Inside was a printed flight confirmation, a one-way ticket to Dubai, dated for the morning of the wedding. The final, irrefutable proof of premeditated desertion. It wasn't cold feet. It was cold calculation. He had planned to abandon her all along, but here's where the story takes an incredible turn. Because what Chijioke didn't realize, what nobody realized, was that he hadn't abandoned someone fragile. He had abandoned a woman of immense, quiet strength. Days blurred into weeks. The public storm began to subside, replaced by the quieter, more insidious pain of private humiliation and shattered trust. Amaka felt adrift, the future she'd meticulously planned reduced to ashes. Her quiet faith was tested as never before. Where was God in this desolation? Had her prayers been meaningless noise? One rainy afternoon, Pastor Nduka visited. He didn't offer platitudes. He sat with her, sipping tea Mama Nkem made, and spoke softly. Amaka, what Chijioke did was not a reflection of your worth. It was a revelation of his profound lack of character. God's silence now doesn't mean his absence. Sometimes he allows the breaking so a stronger foundation can be laid. Your strength today, your dignity walking out of that church, that was faith in action. His words didn't magically heal her, but they planted this seed, a seed of defiance. She wouldn't let Chijioke's cowardice define her. She wouldn't become a permanent victim of his selfishness. And slowly, something beautiful began to emerge from the ashes. The small kitchen in Mama Nkem's apartment, usually fragrant with soups and stews, now held the sweeter aromas of vanilla, cinnamon, and baking chocolate. Amaka, dressed in a simple, flour-dusted apron over jeans and a t-shirt, was meticulously decorating a batch of miniature chocolate cakes. Her movements were focused, calm. Baking had become her therapy, her anchor. The intricate designs, tiny perfect sugar flowers, delicate lace patterns piped in icing, required concentration that pushed other thoughts aside. It was also a reclamation. Her passion, subtly dismissed by Chijioke as a cute hobby, was now her lifeline. Chisholm bustled in, carrying a box of packaging materials. "Okay, the last batch of Ugo's delights for the Ikoyi ladies' luncheon is ready for delivery. They're raving about your lemon poppy seed madeleines, Amaka. Said they've never tasted anything so light and flavorful." She grinned, placing a proud hand on her hip. "Told you, your small business is about to be a big deal." Chisom had been instrumental. She'd used her own network, refusing to let Amaka hide, passionately promoting Ugo's delights, named for Amaka's middle name, meaning eagle, as a story of resilience and exquisite taste. The orders, initially driven by curiosity and pity, were now driven purely by the quality of the treats. The journey wasn't smooth. There were still moments of crushing sadness, waves of anger that surprised her with their intensity, and the lingering sting of public memory. Seeing Chijioke's face on a business magazine cover at a newsstand had sent her reeling back into the apartment for a day. But she was learning to navigate it. Therapy helped. Her faith, though changed, quieter, less about expecting specific outcomes, more about finding strength in the present, remained crucial. She focused on the tangible, perfecting a recipe, securing a small commercial kitchen space with her growing profits, the genuine delight on a client's face. Then came opening day. Ugo's Delights had graduated from Amaka's home kitchen to this charming, bright little shop in a bustling Lekki lane. The air buzzed with excitement. Friends, loyal customers, supportive neighbors, and even a few food bloggers Chisholm had invited. Amaka, radiant in a simple but elegant coral dress, moved through the crowd, greeting people, her smile warm and confident. The trauma hadn't vanished, but it had been woven into the fabric of who she was now, stronger, wiser, more authentically herself. Obiora arrived, bearing a large, beautiful plant. "Congratulations, Amaka. The place looks fantastic. And the samples, incredible." He looked genuinely happy for her. As Amaka thanked him, the cheerful buzz was interrupted by a hesitant figure at the door. Ngozi. She looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight, clutching this small, cheap gift bag. "Amaka," Ngozi began, her voice tight. "Congratulations on the shop. It's nice." She thrust the gift bag forward. I wanted to bring this." Amaka accepted it gracefully. "Thank you, Ngozi. That's kind of you." She waited. She knew this wasn't just about the shop opening. Ngozi looked down, twisting her hands. The silence stretched, filled only by the happy chatter around them. Finally, she blurted out, "I need to apologize." Her voice was low, strained. For before, at the wedding, and after. The things I thought, the things I said to others, I was jealous, always. You had Grace, Mama Nkem's love, and then Chijioke, the life he offered. Seeing you left there, part of me was horrible enough to feel glad, like it finally evened things out. Tears welled in her eyes, tears of anger at herself. It was ugly and small, and I'm sorry. Amaka regarded her cousin. The envy was laid bare, its ugliness exposed. She felt no anger, only this deep sadness for the bitterness that had consumed Ngozi. "Thank you for your apology, Ngozi," Amaka said, her voice calm and clear. Jealousy is a poison. It steals your own joy. What happened to me? It wasn't about you. It was about Chijioke's failings. Holding on to envy only hurts you in the end. I hope you find your own path to peace. Later, as the crowd thinned, Kunle appeared. He looked older, less angry, more weary. "Amaka," he said, his voice gruff. "The shop looks great. You look well." "Thank you, Kunle," Amaka replied, her guard up. He sighed, running a hand over his face. "I owe you an apology too. A big one. That email I sent after. It was selfish, cruel. I was still bitter about the past and seeing you hurt. I twisted it into some kind of chance for me. I didn't see you at all. Just my own bruised ego." He met her gaze. "I'm truly sorry. What Chijioke did was monstrous. You didn't deserve it then, and you didn't deserve my garbage afterwards." As Chisum sidled up, raising an eyebrow. "Apology tour today? I don't know how you do it, Amaka, because if it were me, they would pay for a long time. First Ngozi, now Kunle. What's next? Chijioke crawling in begging?" Amaka shook her head, this wry smile touching her lips. "Chijioke? I doubt it, but it's interesting. His actions forced everyone else to show their true colors too, good and bad." And speaking of Chijioke, she heard snippets about him through the Lagos grapevine. His Dubai venture had reportedly faltered. That smooth charm that worked so well in Lagos seemed less effective elsewhere. There were whispers about impulsive decisions and lost investments. The man who valued image above all else found his carefully constructed facade had developed irreparable cracks. He ran from responsibility then, Obiora told Amaka quietly over coffee one day. He's finding out you can't run forever. Karma isn't always loud, sometimes it's just consequences. Life moved forward, not in a straight line, but with purpose. Ugo's delights flourished. Amaka's story of resilience, quietly shared through her success and her dignified silence about the details of Chijioke's desertion, became an inspiration. She started a small blog, Grace in the Crumbs, sharing recipes intertwined with reflections on faith, healing, and finding strength after betrayal. It resonated deeply with so many people. One bright afternoon, Amaka sat in the small office at the back of her thriving shop. Sunlight streamed in, illuminating the proofs for her first cookbook, Ugo's Delights, Baking with Resilience and Grace. Mama Nkem bustled in the shop front, charming customers. Chisholm was on the phone, negotiating a large corporate order. Amaka's phone buzzed. An unknown international number, a flicker of the old apprehension touched her, but it was quickly replaced by calm. She let it ring out. Whatever it was, a wrong number, a desperate plea from a ghost of the past, or just silence, it held no power over her peace anymore. She looked at the cover proof, a beautiful, imperfectly perfect cake, symbolizing beauty forged from brokenness. She thought of that empty altar, the crushing silence, the walk of shame that became a walk of profound dignity. She thought of the quiet prayers in the darkness, the therapy sessions, the therapeutic precision of piping icing, the taste of success earned through her own hands and spirit. Chijioke had left her standing alone, believing he was abandoning someone fragile. He hadn't realized he was abandoning a woman of immense, quiet strength. He had given her the greatest, albeit most painful gift, the revelation of his own emptiness and the rediscovery of her own profound worth. He had freed her from a life built on the shaky foundation of his charm and indifference. The humiliation hadn't destroyed her. It had refined her. The rejected bride had become the author of her own story, a story not defined by abandonment, but by grace, resilience, and this quiet, unshakable faith that even in the deepest valley, you can find the strength to rise, rebuild, and bake something truly beautiful. The silence at that altar hadn't broken her. It had finally allowed her own true, strong, graceful voice to be heard. And it was saying, clearly and confidently, this is just the beginning. Here's what I want you to understand from Amaka's story. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever happened to you. Not because the pain doesn't matter, but because it reveals strength you never knew you had. Amaka thought she was being rejected. She was actually being redirected toward her true purpose. She thought she was losing everything. She was actually losing the wrong everything to make room for the right everything. If you're going through your own empty altar moment, whatever that looks like, remember Amaka's walk. Head high, spine straight, moving forward with dignity even when everything is falling apart. That's not just resilience. That's revelation. Your betrayal is not your definition. Your abandonment is not your destination. Your humiliation is not your limitation. Sometimes God lets people walk away from you so you can walk into who you're really meant to be. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own strength, if it gave you hope that your current ending might actually be your new beginning, I need you to do something for me right now. Share this story. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with someone who's in their valley moment, who feels abandoned, who thinks their dream is over. Because stories like Amaka's, they change lives. They remind us that we're stronger than our circumstances, bigger than our betrayals, and more resilient than we ever imagined. Hit that notification bell so you never miss stories of real strength and real hope. And tell me in the comments, what's your Ugo's delight? What's the beautiful thing you're building from your broken pieces? The altar may have been empty that day, but Amaka's life, it was about to be fuller than it had ever been. And yours can be too.